The Cerrado biome is a vast savanna sprawling around 2 million kilometers. It's on the border of the Amazon rainforest and in some ways is even more important. That is because it is the most biodiverse tropical savanna in the world. It's home to about 5% of all species on the planet, 1,600 species of mammals, and 10,000 species of plants. While deforestation is highly talked about in the Amazon, you almost never hear about deforestation in the Cerrado. This is bad news. The main reason deforestation happens in this area is because the government is converting forest land to agricultural lands for soy farms and cattle. At this point in time, about 50% of the area's native vegetation and forest have been cleared for Brazil's agricultural expansion, and if Nat Sci 103 has taught us anything, it's that human tampering in an ecosystem tends to degrade the ecosystem as a whole. Although there are many variables in the Cerrado ecosystem, the two that I'm going to focus on in this presentation are the trees and the water, or the precipitation. The main reason for focusing on a seemingly small number of variables is based upon two factors. Factor one is that, simply put, much of southern Brazil's water supply originates from the Cerrado. Factor two is a bit more complicated, but with a small amount of explanation, easily understandable. As was established in the introduction, deforestation is the big problem in the Cerrado ecosystem. Unfortunately, one side effect is that deforestation contributes to climate change. The way this is possible is because trees take in CO2 and release oxygen through photosynthesis. While they're doing this, they keep a small amount of the carbon inside of themselves for future growth and other day-to-day functions. That being said, when the trees are cut down, the excess carbon that is inside of them is released in the atmosphere and contributes to global warming. Overall, deforestation contributes to about 10% of all global warming emissions. When the temperature goes up, precipitation goes down, and seeing as many people in Brazil rely on the water that comes from the Cerrado, it's easy to see why these two variables are extremely important. Currently, the Cerrado is heading towards a new and dangerous threshold. Scientists predict that by sometime this century, parts of the Amazon rainforest, yes, this includes the Cerrado as it is right on the border, may tip into a drier regime. This is of course because, as explained in the system variables section, deforestation causes temperatures to rise. This is helped additionally by other global warming emissions. However, the point still stands. The Cerrado is used to a dry and wet season, but if the threshold is crossed, even the smallest extended dry season could be catastrophic to the system as a whole. This would of course cause even further loss of forest in a region where 50% of the area's native vegetation have already been cleared. This would only further be exacerbated by a nasty positive feedback loop where the hotter climate causes less rain and less rain causes a hotter climate. When it comes to the 7 principles for building resilience, the Cerrado is doing well in some and not so great in others. First off, the diversity and redundancy category. As previously stated, the Cerrado is home to about 1,600 species of mammals and 10,000 species of plants. This makes it the most biodiverse tropical savanna in the world and means that it is doing wonderfully in this category. However, next up in the connectivity department, the situation is much different. Between 2000 and 2017, 23.9% of the native area was lost. Because of this loss, and specifically the loss of connector corridors, the connectivity of the Cerrado was cut massively. In the slow variable section, the Cerrado is doing well. It was found that nutrient cycling through decomposition and decomposition of biomass in general was twice as high as the Cerrado as opposed to the Amazon. Now, in terms of complex adaptive systems thinking, the Cerrado is weak. The government protection is weak in the area compared to the Amazon. Little area is barred from conversion to agricultural land, and deforestation is still an ongoing issue, despite scientific proof that the practice of converting natural savanna to soy fields via deforestation is bad. The Brazilian government is certainly not looking at this ecosystem as a complex adaptive system. They're looking at it as dollar signs. In the encouraging learning section, the Cerrado is also weak. Outside of research articles and a few websites, its name cannot be heard anywhere in the mainstream cultural zeitgeist. This also ties into broadening participation. If no one even knows about the Cerrado and the issues plaguing the area, then participation towards solving the problems are going to be next to none. Lastly, polycentric government is just not there at all. The Brazilian government has turned a blind eye to the Cerrado, making next to none of it protected. To say that regulations in the area are bare bones would be a compliment. Currently, the Cerrado is in the conservation phase of the complex adaptive system. The exploitation phase is marked by high rates of deforestation, which peaked in the early 2000s. Since then, 2010 only saw an 11% deforestation rate compared to that of 1996 to 2005. In this time frame, there was also some government regulation on deforestation and attempts to reel it in, so to speak, which shows a move to the conservation phase. More recently, even though there was previous trends indicating a move to the conservation stage, recent years have seen a 30% increase in deforestation rates, with 2020 overall predictions being worse. This does seem odd, as the cycle can't go from conservation back to exploitation, but maybe this is a sign that the Cerrado is being pushed out of the conservation stage faster. Currently, the system, while clearly being pushed faster out of the conservation stage and out of the for loop via aggressive deforestation rates, has not yet reached a critical tipping point that would prompt the release stage. Overall, at this point in time, I believe the system as a whole is not on the right path. Steps were made in the early 2000s to curb deforestation, but even if these things were still running on those principles, change would be needed. You've also got to consider the ground vegetation loss and climate change as a whole that is sending the Cerrado towards a dry regime. Deforestation makes up 10% of climate emissions, and while yes, that's a lot, there are still 90% of emissions to consider. The 90% figure highlights the need for switches to renewable energy sources, to stop being so feverishly consumerist and produce less waste. Of course, change within the system is important, but changes outside the system are just as important, seeing that if anything is going to drive the rainforests and savannas of Brazil, climate change is the big culprit.